Drury Lane in Beverly Hills? Yes. Approximately what time? It must have been 11:45 or 11 o'clock, around there. Had you had a discussion with Mrs. Barron prior to your coming? No. What was the purpose of your visit? I brought presents for the children. And did Mr. Barron arrive at about the same time? The same time, yes. He come right behind me. And did you hear a discussion between Mr. and Mrs. Barron with reference to Mr. Barron taking the child that morning? Yes, Mrs. Barron said, you have to come back at 12 o'clock. And what did he say? I went into the house and I didn't hear anything anymore. She told him to come back at 12 o'clock? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you hear Mrs. Barron scream or say anything about that she didn't care what any judge said? No. There was no loud commotion. There was just a conversation between the two of them. I didn't hear the conversation. I went into the house and that was it. Did you say anything to Mr. Barron? Yes, I said to Mr. Barron when he took the Christmas presents in front of the house. I said, but Mr. Barron, I thought you should come back at 12 o'clock. It isn't 12 o'clock yet because I spoke to Mrs. Barron a couple of days before and she said, Elsa, come early because his daddy is coming at 12 o'clock and that is why I came an hour early. Did he say anything in response to your statement that you thought he was early? No. Nothing further. Any questions? Yes. You said that you didn't hear Mrs. Barron say anything that morning? No. That is because you went into some part of the house. I went into the house. I said to Mr. Barron, it isn't 12 o'clock yet. I thought you should come at 12 o'clock, Mrs. Barron said. When did you tell Mr. Barron that? Before I went into the house. Before or after you heard Mrs. Barron talk? Before I heard Mrs. Barron. And then when you went into the house, did you hear Mrs. Barron say anything more? Yes. She said, you have to come back at 12 o'clock. You heard that while you were in the house? No, I was still outside. When you went into the house, did you hear either Mrs. Barron or Mr. Barron say anything more? No. As a matter of fact, that is about 14,000 square foot house, isn't it? Yes. When you went to the part of the house that you went to, you couldn't hear whether anybody was talking or yelling? No, I didn't hear anything. Now, you don't work there anymore, do you? No. And when did Mrs. Barron call you to bring the Christmas presents that morning? She did not call me, I called her. When did you call Mrs. Barron to bring the Christmas presents that morning? 3 or 4 days before. On that occasion, 3 or 4 days before, is that when you said something about Mr. Barron to Mrs. Barron? No, not a word. Would you tell us what day it was before Christmas Day that you talked about Mr. Barron to Mrs. Barron? I never spoke to Mrs. Barron about Mr. Barron. And did Mrs. Barron say anything to you before Christmas Day about Mr. Barron? No. She only said, Elsa, come before 12 o'clock because his daddy is coming at 12 o'clock to pick him up. When you arrived at the home around 11 o'clock, did you go in and see Jonathan? Yes. How was he dressed? He was in a robe, I am not sure. You don't remember what he was dressed in? It could have been a robe. It could have been anything. He had trousers on, this I know, and a little, what were you going to say? A little shirt on. He had trousers, a shirt, and do you remember a robe? No, it was a blue with white. I don't know what they are called. Slacks? No. What are they called? I don't know what you are talking about. It is buttoned in here. Overalls? Yes. He had overalls and a shirt, blue and white. Did he have shoes on? Tennis shoes, something like that. No further questions. Were there any other people present when you got in the house? Yes. Were Mrs. Barron's 2 daughters there? Yes. And they were all around the tree opening packages? Yes. And the boy was participating in the opening of the presents? Yes. Nothing further. Step down. Do you have any other witnesses? No, Your Honor. The matter is continued to 2 o'clock. If Your Honor, please, they brought these proceedings. There is no evidence of any subpoenas. We have presented our case and our witnesses. I object to the continuance. I think we have a right to proceed to finality on a matter which is criminal in nature, and they should be prepared to proceed. Yes, they should be, but there are exceptions to everything in life, and sometimes witnesses do these things to lawyers, but I am not going to penalize anybody because of that fact, and it being now almost 11 o'clock, I don't see that there is any great detriment suffered by you or your client. I called it out of order as a matter of convenience to everybody so that the witnesses who were here could be excused. You had this last witness, you said she would be inconvenienced by coming back at 2 o'clock, and that is why I proceeded this morning so that we could get rid of the witnesses who we wouldn't need at 2 o'clock. The parties in council are directed to return at 2 o'clock. Barron, proceed. Mr. Thomasell, be seated and state your full name, please. Joseph Thomasell. Spell your last name, Tomasell. Thank you. Mr. Thomasell, what is your business or occupation? I'm a salesman and assistant manager at Clark and Birchfield. You are married, is that correct? Yes. You and your wife live where? We live at 9023 Cynthia. Is that an apartment building? Yes. Does Mr. Barron live in the same apartment building? Yes. Are you a neighbor of Mr. Barron's? Yes. Do you recall Christmas Day of last year? Yes. Do you recall being contacted by Mr. Barron on Christmas Day of last year? Yes. About what time were you contacted and in what manner were you contacted by Mr. Barron? Well, he called. It was approximately 10 after 11 or so, 5 after 11, and my wife and I were having breakfast and we got up late and he called kind of upset and he asked if I could immediately go with him to perhaps get his son, at least to be there as a witness or something, as he was just there evidently and she would release his child. Did you then say you would go with him? Well, yes. I said I could make it in about an hour. I wasn't dressed and he said, if you can't do it in 5 minutes, I will have to get another neighbor. He was in a pretty upset condition. What did you do? How long did it take you to get ready? It took us about 3 or 4 minutes. We were down in 5 minutes. Did you go with him or in separate cars? We went with him. About what time did you get over to his wife's home? It must have been around 11:30, give or take 5 minutes. What happened when you got there? Well, we were pulling up. We pulled into a residence and Mr. Barron was just getting out of the car and another car arrived and there was some woman who he evidently knew and she was carrying in some packages and he assisted her in carrying some packages into the house. He arrived at the front door and she was about 10 or 15 steps behind and he knocked on the door and she answered and he said, I would like to have my child. And at that time the woman pulled over, walked in where she could see the woman, and which woman walked in where to see what woman? I don't know this woman. This woman who arrived in the car. The stranger? Yes, to me. Tony knew her, and Mrs. Barron saw her and opened up the door and said, how are you? Come in, and so on. Who did she say that to? She said that to the woman, and at that time, she was kind of talking, paying attention to the woman, and the woman walked in, and Tony released the packages, and she turned to Tony and said, you can't have the child. You will have to come back at 2 o'clock. Did she say noontime or 2 o'clock or any other time? No, 2 o'clock. And how did she say it? In a calm voice? She said it rather real brisk, a real sharp, definite way, definitely 2 o'clock. And then what happened? She closed the door and we left, and that was it. I have nothing further. Mr. Thomasell, had you met Mrs. Barron before? I have seen her several times, yes. And approximately what time would you say it was that you arrived at the residence? Approximately 11:30, give or take 5 minutes. I didn't have time to put my watch on. Did you get out of the car or did you stay in the car? I stood in the car with the window down. How far would you say you were from the doorway? Did Mrs. Barron come out of the house or did she stand in the doorway? She came out approximately 3 feet or so at one point. And you were approximately how far distant? Approximately 12 to 15 feet. And as best you can recall, will you tell us what each of the parties said that you heard? Yes. Well, starting from the beginning, yes. We arrived once again and Mr. Barron got out of the car. He was just getting out of the car and another car pulled in the driveway. It was this woman. Question by plaintiff's attorney. 225 warm up. Mr. Thomasell, had you met Mrs. Barron before? I have seen her several times, yes. And approximately what time would you say it was that you arrived at the residence? Approximately 11:30, give or take 5 minutes. I didn't have time to put my watch on. Did you get out of the car or did you stay in the car? I stood in the car with the window down. How far would you say you were from the doorway? Did Mrs. Barron come out of the house or did she stand in the doorway? She came out approximately 3 feet or so at one point. And you were approximately how far distant? Approximately 12 to 15 feet. And as best you can recall, will you tell us what each of the parties said that you heard? Yes. Well, starting from the beginning, yes. We arrived once again and Mr. Barron got out of the car. He was just getting out of the car and another car pulled in the driveway. It was this woman. Tony knew the woman and started walking up to her. She had approximately 10 packages and he assisted her in carrying some of the packages. Was there any conversation between Mr. Barrett and the woman, the strange woman? No, just hi and hello. Nothing else was said? Not really. Do you recall anything else? No, I don't. You could have heard their conversation if they did say anything, is that correct? At one point, I don't think I could have. They were about 30 feet away from me. All you heard was an exchange of pleasantries? Yes. Mrs. Barron then came to the door. She was at the door with the chain on the door latch and her head out where she could be seen. What did you hear her say? Well, she didn't say anything until Tony walked up and she kind of ignored him. At that time, she was looking out and the woman walked up and she unlocked the door and opened the door. Did she then shut the door and go in with the woman? No. She stood at the door. This went on a minute or 2 minutes until she got in with the packages, and Mr. Barone had some packages and he put them down on the steps. But as soon as the woman was in the door, she just simply said briskly and sharply, Mr. Barron, you will have to come back at 2 o'clock. You can't have the child. And that is all you remember? That is all I remember. That is all there was. Was there somebody else with you? Yes, my wife. She was in the car? Yes, and she heard everything also. You were asked to come as a witness because Mr. Barron, well, I was asked to come as a witness. I am talking about on the 25th. Yes, most of all, he was speaking with my wife and I thought she would release the child to him. Now that was the main thing. He didn't have any problems. And did you take any notes since you were being asked to come as a witness, or are you just speaking now from your recollection of the events at that time? Actually, we just discussed it and there wasn't much said, and the little that was said I retained perfectly. You have given us all that you heard? Yes. You think you heard everything that transpired? Yes, I did. I know I heard everything at all times. Nothing further. Okay, this is a 2:25, 4 boys for 5 minutes. Cross-examination by plaintiff's attorney. Ready? Was Mr. Plum, from this point of view, able to see the officers who were firing at him, sir? I don't guess he was looking back to see them. All he would have had to do was turn around and he would have seen them. Isn't that a fact, sir? Yes, he could have turned around and seen them. And then to the best of your ability, you think that he knew they were officers firing? I don't know what was running through his head. All right. But you did not hear any words until he reached this roof over here. That's right. Now, these spent cartridges, you described it, that were found over here, sir. You say the next door down over here. And that would be a yard back there. You don't know where they came from or who they belonged to? No, I don't. And were you aware of other cartridges being found along Duncan Street, also near, at, or about that point? Unless they were police cartridges there, I don't know. Right. As a matter of fact, when you first saw him on the roof, on the roof of the garage there, you had heard several shots at that time, and you do not know from whom they came. Is that correct, sir? Well, as far as I could see, the police were the only ones doing any shooting. As far as you could see, as far as I could see, and I could see pretty good. There is some underbrush here. Let him answer the question. As far as you can see, and you can see what? Pretty good. You can see pretty good. All right. Now there is some underbrush here, and there are several wooden gates and some foliage here. It is not underbrush. It is just an alley with wine bottles and trash. That's all. Some debris there? Yes, some. And isn't there a wooden gate in that small alley there too, sir? Yes, it is a wooden gate. About 4 or 5 feet high, about 4 feet high. And then actually, sir, you cannot be positive what went on beyond the gate at this point. That is, on the far side of you, well, on the gate, see, the gate is 4 foot high, but the roof where Ronald was is at least 20 foot high, something like that. Did you see Ronald get on that roof? It is 20 feet high, you say? Yes. Did you see how he got up there? See, the garage roof is right next door to this other roof, right over here. No, that is an alley in between there. Where is the garage roof over here? The garage roof is over here. Correct me. Where now? May I come up? Sure. My house is directly in front of the garage roof right here. The garage roof is over here. Can he stand to the side Now stand to the side and talk loud enough so everyone can hear you. Put a mark here where the garage roof is. And there would be a line here, and this would be the garage straight in front of my house. And this is a separate house, and from the garage roof to this next house, the wall was about 8 or 9 foot. Now, do you know how he got on top of the garage roof? You can be seated again. And do you know how he got to the garage roof? Well, I don't know how he got on the garage roof. You don't know? No. Until he got to the garage roof, Mr. Hill. You don't know really what went on because you couldn't observe it that clearly? No, I don't. So you don't know what, if any shots were fired right before the point he got on the garage roof, or what, if anything, happened before that time? Right. Right. Now, defense counsel directed your attention to Mr. Plum's hands at that point. Now, he was talking about the time that Mr. Plum was first seen on the garage roof and the point that he was running and made 2 leaps. Isn't that correct, sir? Yes, sir. He didn't have the gun at the first leap, and he didn't have the gun at the second leap. That is over No Name Alley. He didn't have the gun in his hand anyway at that point. Isn't that correct, sir? Yeah, that's correct. And when he was making those leaps, he didn't have nothing in his hands. Right, exactly. You are a friend of Mr. Plum's. Is that not correct, Mr. Hill? Yeah, okay. No further questions. Wait 1 second. Mr. Hill, you stated in response to counsel's cross-examination that you did not hear him say anything as he was jumping over these alleys? Yes, sir. Or standing on the roof. Or standing on the roof? Yes, sir. Until he got to his own roof. Is that right? Yes, sir. While he was traveling from the garage to the other roof across the 2-foot alley and then across No Name Alley, what we have come to call as a No Name Alley, was he just taking a leisurely stroll, or was he running, or was he, what was he doing? How fast was he going? Well, he wasn't moving at all when he was first on the garage roof, and then when the firing started, the shooting, when they started shooting, he, went up with his hands to grab the roof, and he pulled himself up on that roof. And like I said, then he proceeded to go up on the rest of the roofs. How fast was he going? He wasn't going too fast. He couldn't go too fast because he was in a crouched position. He was crouching, and the police were firing at him all this time? Yes, sir. How far away were the police about? Well, on the last No Name Alley towards Lombard Street, there were about 2 policemen there. And there was a police at my steps, and on Boyer Street there were policemen. And there were policemen all over the place. I couldn't say where all of them were. And were they all firing? I couldn't say whether all of them were firing or not, but most of the ones I could see were firing. All right. From your vantage point, could you possibly tell the jury what would have happened to him if he would have stood up to say anything from that crouch? Objection. If Your Honor, please, I will sustain the objection. All right, starting point, anyone? Start with question. All right. But you did not hear any words until direct by plaintiff's attorney. Officer, would you please look at the manila envelope, which has been numbered Exhibit 1, and the Ziploc baggies that the criminalist removed from that envelope, and tell the court and the jury whether or not you recognize those items? Yes, I do. I recognize all 3 items. How do you recognize them? My handwriting is on the envelope here, and my signature is also on it, along with the initials, the date, and I also recognize this as being the items that I placed inside the envelope when this was sealed. And besides the notations that the criminalist just testified to, does it appear to be in the same condition as when you placed it in that manila envelope after finding it on August the 25th of 1993? Yes, it does. The evidence, or the baggie that you have found that you placed in that manila envelope, is that the baggie that you testified to yesterday that you found in the defendant's motel room on August the 25th in the jewelry case? Yes, it is. May I proceed? Yes. Officer, I'm showing you number 2 for identification. Do you recognize this? Yes, I do. What do you recognize it to be? It's an item of evidence that I booked into the police department under the same report number, under the same case, and it's a scale for measuring. And is this the scale that you testified to yesterday that Mr. Smith asked you about? Yes, it is. Would you open that and show it to the jury, please? Objection, Your Honor, on the basis of relevance, I'll allow it. There is testimony that it was found in the jewelry case, or the jewelry box, rather. I'll allow it. I don't know how to work it, but that's what's inside. It has a white powdery substance on the bowl of the scale, and it has an indicating scale in grams from 0 to 5, 0 to 1 gram, and carats also. To the best of your recollection, you found this scale with the controlled substance that the criminal has just testified to? That's correct. Officer Zins, Mr. Smith asked you yesterday if you would check your police records to determine or refresh your memory as to whether or not you took the defendant to the police station or to the jail when you questioned him. Did you do that? I didn't bring him to the police department for questioning according to the logs that I have. All right. And you checked what police records to determine that? The dispatch log. And based on the dispatch log, does it tell you what you did that night when you left the hotel? By times it does. What did you do when you left the hotel? I went en route to the West Valley Jail, which is about half a mile from here, about a mile from here. Did you go directly en route to the jail? Yeah. Or did you start to go to the police station and then go to the jail, or did you go directly to the jail? I indicated to the dispatcher that I was going to be en route to the police department and apparently changed that to be en route to the West Valley Jail. Thank you. I have no further questions. Cross, please. Officer Zins, could you tell us what the nature of the substance of that scale is made out of? Plastic. Smooth surface, sir? No. Is the interior part of the scale surface smooth? Yes, it is. On that surface of the interior part of the scale, could that have been fingerprinted? It could be with, it would be unlikely that you'd get any kind of prints off of it. I'm talking about the box, sir, inside the box. The interior of the box, the interior of the box. The interior, I would say the same results. Could dust it for fingerprints. May I approach, Your Honor? Yes, okay. So the interior of this box, there appears to be some fingerprint smudges on the interior. Does there not? I don't see any. Are there smudges on the interior of the box, sir? I don't see any. Okay. But the interior of the box, does it? The interior of the box is light reflective? Yes, it is. Objection, relevance, I'll allow it. And the scale body is light reflective also, is it not? Yes, it is. Okay. But neither the interior of the box, the exterior of the box, or the body of the scale were ever fingerprinted to determine whose fingerprints might or might not be on there. Is that correct? That is correct. Did you ever make a determination on whether the jewelry box had been retained when you went to the police station yesterday? If I would have retained the jewelry box, it would have been in this envelope. Okay, plaintiff's attorney is Mr. Pearson, P-E-A-R-S-O-N. Defense attorney, Mr. Frizzell, F-R-I-Z-E-L-L. 200 for voice, 15 minutes, starts with the court. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Be seated, state your name, and spell the last name, please. Rodney D. Englert, E-N-G-L-E-R-T. Sir, calling your attention to April 14, 1969, what was your occupation and assignment? Police officer for the City of Downey, assigned to Administrative Detective Bureau, working narcotics and working vice. Sometime prior to 9:30 p.m. that particular day, April 14, did you receive any information concerning possible illegal activities taking place at 9938 Downey Bridge Road in the City of Downey, County of Los Angeles? Yes, I did. What information did you receive? I received information from Detective Carpenter and Detective Lund of the Downey Police Department that they had effected an arrest at 9938 Downey Bridge Road on a Friday, on a Thursday, because they related this to me on the preceding Friday, and stated that in that location there was a slot machine from the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. Are we certain about the word preceding? Do I understand this correctly now? He said that he received word on the preceding Friday. Well, I am not sure how the court interprets what the witness is saying, Your Honor. Sounds to me as though he received word before the event. Yes, that is my understanding. I will clarify it if the court would so desire. You had better. Officer, April 14, 1969. Do you recall what day of the week that was on a Monday? And when was it? You received this information from Detectives Carpenter and Lund 2 days prior on a Friday, or 3 days prior on a Friday. Now, the Friday just prior to this Monday, is that correct? Yes, sir. All right, sir. And they told you that there was a slot machine at that location? Yes, sir. And was any further information given to you concerning any individuals that a Ronnie Brown lived at that location by himself, that his parents did not live there with him, and that he was a male white, approximately 21 years of age? Was there any information given to you as to how these detectives arrived at the conclusion that a slot machine was at that location? And they were inside of the residence and effected an arrest of another person whom I do not know. Did they indicate to you that they had actually seen this slot machine with their own eyes? Yes, sir, they did. And they had seen it when, on what particular day? Oh, I think they were there on a Thursday, which would be probably the 10th of April. And I got the information on the 11th, and we went there on the 14th. I think I have the dates right. Thursday is when they made the arrest. Friday is when they gave me the information as to what they had seen. And the following Monday, myself and my partners went to that location. Did both of these detectives indicate that, or did each of these detectives indicate that they had personally seen this particular machine? Yes, sir, they did. I see. And you were working the vice detail at that time? Yes, sir, I was. Now, pursuant to that information that you had received, did you then proceed to the location at approximately 9:30 in the evening? Yes, sir, we did. You say we. Who else was with you? Detective Kelly and Detective Dorn of the Administrative and Narcotics Vice Detail of the City of Downey. When you went to that location, how were you dressed? Plain clothes. Did you then go to the door? Yes, sir. Did you or any fellow officers knock or ring the doorbell? We all went to the front door and I knocked on the front door. And what happened then? A male answered the door, and I stated I was a police officer conducting a gambling investigation. I asked for Ronnie Brown. And what took place next? The defendant, who was standing behind this male that opened the door, asked us to come in. He made himself apparent. He walked in front of the other person that had opened the door and asked us to come in. Was there any conversation between either you or the defendant as to who he was? I asked him if he was Ronnie Brown, and he stated that he was. I told him that we were there conducting an investigation where it was alleged that he had a slot machine. He stated that he did. And I stated, without going any further, I would like to advise you of your rights. And did you advise him of certain rights at that time? Yes, sir, I did. What did you tell him? I advised him of his rights by reading his rights off of a card that I had with me. Do you have that card with you at this time? I think so. I have one with me that was